I never thought I'd be that person, the one who gets cut off from their family. My name is Erica, and for the past 3 years, I haven't spoken to my parents, my younger brother Mark, or my little sister Jenny. We used to be close, or at least I thought we were. Growing up in Riverdale, our family wasn't wealthy, but we got by. Mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and Dad was a high school teacher. Money was always tight with 3 kids, but we managed. I was the oldest, always feeling responsible for my siblings. When I started my marketing company right after college, I promised myself I'd help my family if I ever made it big. And I did make it big. WebSpark marketing took off faster than I expected. Within 2 years, I had a team of 15 people and clients from all over the country. The money started rolling in, and true to my word, I began helping my family. First, it was paying off some of my parents' credit card debt. Then, I started helping with Mark's college tuition. Jenny had just graduated and wanted to move to the city, so I paid her rent for a nice apartment. I covered groceries, utilities, and even vacations for my parents. Looking back, I was spending tens of thousands of dollars on them every year. "Erica, you're such a lifesaver," Mom would say when I transferred money for their mortgage payment. "Sis, I promise I'll pay you back someday," Mark would tell me when I sent him money for books and food. "You're the best sister ever, I'll treat you to coffee sometime," Jenny would text after I'd paid her rent for the month. I didn't mind. My business was thriving, and I loved being able to help. I never kept track of exactly how much I gave them. They were family, after all. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. The economy took a hit, and several of my biggest clients went bankrupt owing me large sums. New privacy regulations forced expensive compliance changes. A key employee left and took clients with him. In just 6 months, WebSpark went from thriving to barely surviving. I tried everything, cutting costs, taking out loans, even selling my condo and moving to a small apartment. Nothing worked. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen, running the numbers for the 100th time. My phone pinged with a text from Jenny asking for money for a weekend trip with friends. That's when I knew I had to tell them. I called a family meeting at my parents' house. Everyone was there, expecting our usual Sunday dinner. "I have something to tell you all," I said, my voice shaking. "WebSpark is failing. I'm nearly bankrupt, and I can't help you financially anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. "What do you mean you can't help anymore?" Jenny finally asked, her voice sharp. "Is this some kind of joke?" Mark asked, looking annoyed. "No, it's not a joke. I've been trying to save the company for months, but it's not working." Dad leaned forward, his face red. "So you're just cutting us off? Just like that?" "I don't have a choice," I said, feeling tears well up. "I thought you would understand. I thought maybe you could help me for once." Mom laughed, a harsh sound I'd never heard from her before. "Help you? We're barely getting by with your support, and now you want us to help you? You're doing this on purpose," Jenny accused. "You're tired of helping us, so you made up this story." "I didn't make anything up," I shouted, pulling out financial statements from my bag. "Look at these. I'm about to lose everything." But they wouldn't look, they wouldn't listen. "I think you should leave," Dad said coldly. "You've offended and humiliated us enough." "We don't want to see you anymore," Mom added. "Not until you come to your senses." I left their house in tears, completely shocked. The people I'd supported for years, the family I'd sacrificed for, had turned their backs on me the moment I couldn't give them money. It was like I'd never meant anything to them beyond my checkbook. 2 weeks later, I closed WebSpark. That was 3 years ago. After that painful night, I packed what little I had left and moved to Colorado, the neighboring state. I got a job at a local marketing firm as an employee, no ownership, no big risks. I rented a tiny studio apartment and lived on the bare minimum, saving every penny I could. For 2 years, I worked like crazy, often taking odd jobs on weekends to make extra money. No one in Colorado knew about my past success or failure. I was just Erica, the hardworking marketing specialist who never went out or took vacations. And then, 1 year ago, I took the plunge again. I opened Summit Digital Marketing, a smaller, more focused version of my old company. This time, I was careful: no overexpansion, no risky clients, proper contracts, and most importantly, no supporting my family. Every extra dollar went into an emergency fund. It worked. Within a year, Summit Digital was profitable and growing steadily. I was back on my feet, wiser and more cautious than before. And then, last week, my cousin Taylor called. "Erica, it's been forever. Did you hear about Jenny?" "No," I said, my heart beating faster. "Is she okay?" "She's fine, she's getting married. The engagement party is next weekend at Carluccio's restaurant. I thought you'd want to know." I sat down hard on my couch, my mind racing. Jenny was getting married. My little sister was having an engagement party, and I hadn't even known she was dating someone seriously. "Thanks for telling me," I said quietly. After I hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. 3 years of silence, 3 years of hurt. But this was Jenny's engagement. Despite everything, she was still my sister. I made up my mind right then. I would go to the engagement party. Maybe it was time to try to fix things. Maybe they'd had time to reflect on how they'd treated me. Maybe we could start over. I booked a flight back to Riverdale for the following weekend, not telling anyone I was coming. I was nervous but hopeful as I packed my bag. The flight to Riverdale felt longer than the 2 hours it actually took. My mind kept replaying every possible scenario of how my family might react when they saw me. Would they be happy, angry? Would they even acknowledge me? By the time the plane touched down, my stomach was in knots. I checked into a small hotel near downtown, not wanting to impose on any relatives who might feel caught in the middle. After a quick shower and change, I caught a rideshare to Carluccio's, the upscale Italian restaurant where Jenny's engagement party was being held. Standing outside the restaurant, I could see through the windows that the party was in full swing. Jenny was wearing a sleek blue dress, laughing with a tall man I assumed was her fiancé. Mom and Dad were chatting with some older couples I recognized as their friends. Mark was at the bar, looking much more grown up than the college kid I remembered. For a moment, I almost turned around and left. But I'd come this far. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped inside. A few people glanced my way, but no one seemed to recognize me at first. Then Jenny looked up, and our eyes met. Her smile froze. She excused herself from her conversation and headed straight for me. "Erica," she said, her voice tight, "what are you doing here?" "I heard about your engagement, congratulations." She grabbed my arm and steered me toward a side door. "We need to talk, privately." My heart lifted a little. Maybe she wanted to clear the air between us, to apologize for how things had ended. Maybe this was the beginning of reconciliation. Jenny led me into a small private dining room and closed the door. But instead of speaking, she pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. Within minutes, the door opened again, and Mom, Dad, and Mark filed in. Their faces were hard, unwelcoming. Before I could even say hello, Dad spoke. "You shouldn't have come, Erica." "I wanted to be here for Jenny's engagement," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're still family." Mom scoffed. "Family? You abandoned us 3 years ago when we needed you most." "I didn't abandon you, my business failed, I was bankrupt." "Convenient timing," Mark muttered. Jenny crossed her arms. "Let me be clear, Erica. We don't need you here. We've managed just fine without you. We didn't starve to death without your money." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Jenny, I paid your rent for 2 years. I gave you money for groceries, for clothes, for everything you needed." She waved her hand dismissively. "That's in the past. You haven't helped at all for 3 years. Do you know how hard it's been? I've had to spend my own money on everything." Mark stepped forward. "I had everything planned out, Erica. My whole future. I was counting on your support, and you just pulled the rug out from under me." All my plans collapsed because of you. I looked from one face to another, seeing nothing but resentment and anger. No sympathy for what I'd gone through. No acknowledgement of the years I'd supported them. No gratitude for the sacrifices I'd made. So that's it, I said quietly, you only wanted me around when I was giving you money. Dad shifted uncomfortably, but didn't contradict me. Mom looked away, Mark stared at his shoes. Jenny just waved toward the door, you should go. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I just turned and walked out of that room, through the restaurant full of celebrating people, and into the cool evening air. Only when I was sitting in the back of another rideshare did I allow the tears to come. Back at my hotel, I canceled my return flight and booked one for the first thing the next morning. I couldn't stay in Riverdale another day. I ordered room service but couldn't eat. I tried to watch TV but couldn't focus. Eventually, I just lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, feeling empty and betrayed. My phone buzzed with a notification. Jenny had tagged me in something. Curious despite myself, I opened it. It was a video. The thumbnail showed me leaving Carluccio's, head down, shoulders slumped. I pressed play. Everyone, take a good look, Jenny's voice said over the footage of me walking dejectedly out of the restaurant. This is my sister Erica, who deserves every bit of this humiliation. 3 years ago, she suddenly stopped helping our family financially and claimed she was bankrupt. The camera zoomed in on my face. I looked devastated. Because of her selfishness, I had to give up traveling, move back in with our parents, and even pay my own rent. Can you believe it? Jenny's mocking tone continued. She betrayed her family by refusing to support us, and she doesn't deserve forgiveness. Look at her running away like a cowardly rabbit. This is what happens to people who don't help their family. The video ended with Jenny's laughter. I sat frozen, phone in hand, unable to process what I'd just seen. My own sister had not only rejected me to my face but had publicly humiliated me for entertainment. She'd filmed me at my most vulnerable moment and shared it for others to mock. Something shifted inside me then. The hurt began to harden into something else. Determination, resolve, anger, yes, but cold and clear, not hot and blinding. I opened my suitcase and took out my laptop. I booked my flight home for early the next morning, then spent an hour checking my emails and messages, trying to distract myself. But my mind kept circling back to Jenny's video, to my family's words, to years of one-sided generosity. As the night deepened, a plan began to form in my mind. I hadn't asked anything from my family in all the years I'd supported them. I'd given freely, expecting nothing in return except perhaps some gratitude or love. But now, perhaps it was time to change that approach. The flight back to Colorado seemed to pass in a blur. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't even unpack my suitcase. Instead, I went straight to my home office and pulled out the filing cabinet where I kept all my important documents. I started rifling through folders, taxes, business licenses, insurance policies. Then I found what I was looking for, a thick folder labeled family. As I flipped through the papers, memories washed over me. 5 years ago, my parents had called me in a panic. Their house needed major renovations, the foundation was cracking, the roof was leaking, and the electrical system needed to be completely redone. The total cost, $100,000. We don't know what to do, Erica, Mom had said, her voice breaking. The bank won't approve another loan because of our debt ratio. I'd been doing well then, flush with cash from my growing business. I'll help, I'd said without hesitation, I can give you the money. My accountant had insisted on formalizing the arrangement. Family or not, this is a significant amount, she'd warned, you need protection. So we'd drawn up a notarized agreement. The document stated clearly that I could demand repayment at any time, with reasonable notice. My parents had signed without reading the fine print, just grateful for the rescue. A few months later, Mark had come to me about his college tuition. He'd lost his scholarship due to poor grades one semester and was facing expulsion if he couldn't pay. Again, I'd stepped in, this time with $50,000. Again, my accountant had insisted on a formal agreement. Again, the recipient had signed without much attention to the details. I'd never intended to collect on these debts. They were family, and I'd been happy to help. But now, holding these documents in my hands, I saw them differently. They weren't just papers, they were leverage. They were justice. I took out my phone and photographed both documents. Then I composed 2 emails, one to my parents and one to Mark. I attached the relevant photos and wrote nearly identical messages. As per the attached agreement, I am formally requesting repayment of the $100,000 and $50,000 loan. You have 30 days to repay this amount in full. If you cannot or will not comply, I will pursue legal action as outlined in our contract, Erica. I hesitated for just a moment before hitting send on both emails. Was I being too harsh? Then I remembered Jenny's video, my parents' cold rejection, Mark's accusations. My finger pressed the button. Within minutes, my phone started ringing. I let the first few calls go to voicemail, but eventually, I answered. How could you? My mother's voice was shrill with anger. Your own family. You're demanding money from your own flesh and blood. Yes, I said calmly, I'm asking for what's legally mine. We don't have that kind of money just sitting around. We were going to use that money for Jenny's wedding. We promised her $100,000 for the celebration. That explained a lot. Well, Mom, that's not my problem. The money was a loan, not a gift. You signed the agreement. Jenny called next, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You've ruined everything. My wedding was going to be perfect, and now it's all falling apart because of you. Your wedding is in jeopardy because Mom and Dad promised you money that wasn't theirs to give, I replied evenly. They'd been saving for my wedding for years. Apparently not, if they were planning to use my loan money. You're just jealous because I'm getting married and you're alone. I laughed at that. Jenny, this isn't about your wedding, this is about respect. You and the rest of the family showed me none. You kicked me out of your engagement party and humiliated me online. That was a joke. It wasn't funny, and now you're facing the consequences. Mark's message came by text rather than call. It was angry but also desperate. I don't have that kind of money right now. I've been unemployed for months. What am I supposed to do? I texted back, figure it out, get a job, take out a loan, sell your car. I don't really care how you do it, just like you didn't care what happened to me 3 years ago. He sent back a string of angry emojis and swear words. I blocked his number. The next few days brought more calls, more texts, more emails. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions on the situation. Most sided with my parents and siblings, calling me greedy and vindictive. I deleted their messages without responding. Then my mother escalated. She posted a long rant on social media about her cruel, heartless daughter who was demanding money from her struggling family. A good daughter would forgive these debts, she wrote. Only a petty, ungrateful person would do this to her own parents. Erica is wealthy from her new business, but she's squeezing us for every penny out of spite. That was the final straw. If they wanted to make this public, I could play that game too. I spent hours compiling evidence, bank statements showing years of financial support, screenshots of grateful texts that had turned to angry demands, calculations of just how much money I'd given them over the years. Then I wrote my own post, laying out the whole story. I explained how I'd supported them for years, how they'd rejected me when I couldn't help anymore, how Jenny had humiliated me at her engagement party. I attached the bank statements as proof of my generosity. I included screenshots of their recent nasty messages. And, most damaging of all, I embedded Jenny's video mocking me, along with her commentary. I pressed post and turned off my phone. When I checked social media the next morning, my post had hundreds of comments. Most were sympathetic to me. People were shocked by Jenny's video, by my family's entitlement, by the stark evidence of my years of support contrasted with their treatment of me. Even my parents' friends were commenting that they'd had no idea I'd been paying my sister's rent or helping with the mortgage. The tide of public opinion had turned decidedly in my favor. A month after my social media post, I found myself sitting in a conference room at my lawyer's office. Across the table sat my parents and Mark, along with their attorney. Nobody was smiling. "Let's get started," my lawyer, Rebecca, said briskly. "We're here to establish a repayment schedule for the outstanding loans." My parents' lawyer, a thin man named Mr. Peterson, nodded. "My clients are prepared to acknowledge the debt and set up a payment plan." It was strange seeing my family in this formal setting. Mom kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, though I couldn't tell if the tears were genuine or for show. Dad looked older somehow, the lines in his face deeper than I remembered. Mark wouldn't meet my eyes at all. The lawyers did most of the talking, discussing terms and conditions, interest rates, and time frames. Eventually, they settled on a 4-month repayment schedule. My parents would pay $25,000 per month, and Mark would pay $12,500 per month until the debt was cleared. I hadn't asked where the money was coming from because I didn't care. I just wanted what was mine. Yet watching my parents sign the agreement, their hands slightly trembling, I felt a twinge of something. Not regret, exactly, but awareness of how completely things had changed between us. As we were leaving, Mark caught up with me in the hallway. "Happy now?" he asked bitterly. "Not happy," I corrected him, but resolved. He shook his head and walked away. That was the last time I spoke to any of them during the repayment period. True to the agreement, the payments arrived on schedule. Each month, 2 deposits hit my account, one from my parents, one from Mark. I didn't question how they'd managed to come up with the money. I simply watched my bank balance grow and felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. This wasn't about the money itself, my business was doing well enough that I didn't need it. This was about principle. About consequences. About 4 months after the repayment was completed, Taylor called me again. "Thought you might want to know," she said, "Jenny got married yesterday." Oh, I hadn't heard anything about it. "Yeah, just a small ceremony at the courthouse, no big reception or anything." "What happened to her grand plans?" I asked, genuinely curious. Taylor laughed. "Well, when your parents couldn't contribute the money they'd promised, she tried to make her fiancé, Ben, pay for everything. He refused, said a big wedding wasn't important to him. They almost broke up over it. But they worked it out? Sort of, they compromised on a simple ceremony. Jenny's furious about it, though. She hasn't even posted wedding photos online, which is weird for her. She posts about everything. I checked social media later and saw Taylor was right. Jenny's accounts, usually full of carefully curated images of her life, were silent about her wedding. Instead, she'd posted a vague quote about overcoming disappointments and moving forward despite setbacks. I couldn't help but feel a small, petty satisfaction. 6 months passed. Then a year. I continued building my business, taking the lessons I'd learned from both failure and success to heart. I put money away each month into savings, creating the financial safety net I'd never had before. I made new friends, dated occasionally, and generally built a life I was proud of, one that didn't revolve around supporting others. Then one day, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Erica, it's Mark, I was hoping we could meet. I'm in Colorado for a job interview, and I'd like to see you." My first instinct was to refuse. What could he possibly have to say that I wanted to hear? But curiosity won out. "Fine. There's a coffee shop downtown called Mountainside, tomorrow at noon." He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He'd guessed my order correctly, black with 1 sugar. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "Why are you here, Mark?" He took a deep breath, to apologize. "I've been seeing a therapist for the past few months, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about how I treated you. How we all treated you. And I was wrong, we were all wrong. You supported us for years, and the moment you couldn't anymore, we turned our backs on you. It was selfish and cruel. I studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity, but found none. What's changed, Mark? Besides the therapy? Everything. I got a good job 6 months ago. Moved out of mom and dad's place into my own apartment. Started taking responsibility for my own life instead of expecting handouts. He looked down at his coffee. I realized how much I'd been depending on you, and how unfair that was. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt. But there was something different about Mark now. A maturity that hadn't been there before. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued. I wouldn't forgive me. But I needed you to know that I understand now, and I'm sorry. Are mom and dad and Jenny sorry too? He grimaced. No, they still think you betrayed them. Jenny especially. I nodded, not surprised. And you're not here to ask for money? God, no. He looked genuinely horrified at the suggestion. I'm managing my own finances now. Actually doing pretty well at it. We talked for another hour. He told me about his new job, his apartment, his goals for the future. I told him about my business, carefully avoiding any mention of how successful it had become. Trust would take time to rebuild, if it ever could be. As we were saying goodbye, he asked, "Can we stay in touch? Maybe call occasionally?" I considered it for a moment. We can try. But Mark, if you ever ask me for money again. I won't, he promised. That part of our relationship is over for good. We've maintained contact since then. Occasional calls, text messages on birthdays and holidays. It's not the close relationship we once had, but it's something. A beginning, perhaps. As for my parents and Jenny, I haven't spoken to them since that day in the lawyer's office. I don't know if we'll ever reconcile, and I'm not sure I want to. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But I'm at peace with that. I've learned valuable lessons from all of this, about business, about money, about family, and most importantly, about myself. I know now that I can lose everything and still survive. That I can start over and succeed again. That I can stand up for myself when necessary.